Walmart seems to want to continue to double down on their fight against the $15 minimum wage. Now, for background, many retailers from Amazon, Target, Best Buy have been hiking their minimum wage to $15 an hour. But Walmart, the largest employer that employs over 1.5 million people, has consistently shot the argument down. Now, for perspective, Walmart's annual revenue last year increased by $35 billion to more than $500 billion in total, on which it earned $22 billion in profit. So here's the question for you, Kellogg Business School class. And this question comes from the A&M Consumer and Retail Group, which puts Ann and I on the spot every week with a tough question. This week, they're bringing the question to you. So here it is. Walmart CEO Doug McMillon began working at Walmart as an hourly associate, and he recently said that raising wages to a blanket $15 minimum would compromise a ladder of opportunity that encourages its employees to strive to earn more as they climb the ranks. Should we agree or disagree with Mr. McMillon's rationale? What do you guys think?
Yeah, so actually I've been following OmniTalk, so I love your guys' kind of features of the Walmart, Amazon, like back and forth. I think it's fascinating. And I think, in particular, this ladder of opportunity, I think it was like a Houdini move. That's how you guys described it before, which I thought was really funny. I'm just curious why the position has to be that raising the bottom rung has to compromise the upper rungs. To me, it seems like a natural kind of comeback is well, why can't you just increase everything slightly? I know there's a whole lot of economics and profits, plays there that need to be discussed, but it seems like that's the piece that's kind of missing. The argument of well, we can't raise the bottom rung because it compromises upper rungs. Well, why can't you just kind of shift everything up? Why isn't that being talked about?
Right, or why wouldn't you just shift down everything in that case too? So no. So you're not buying it. You're not buying this as well. Okay, interesting. Yeah, thanks for the support too. That's awesome. All right, Tracy, what do you think?
Hey guys, thanks again. In addition to Amanda's point about shifting the rungs, this also seems like they are concerned about the amount of incentives they would then have to create if they raise the minimum wage, because this really sounds like it's an issue of how do we continue to get employees or motivate employees to want to progress in within the company. And I think that's a real issue for any company, established or growing. And so that's a real concern. I would argue that baseline wage pay for an employee should be increased, and then you need to reevaluate your incentive structure if that is in fact the key concern, which to me is this concern that the CEO is raising indicates that there's a concern about future incentives for employees to continue to raise up in the company.
Yeah, Tracy, let me ask you a question now. I want to probe that a little bit. So you bring up an interesting point. Should the incentives to work hard and to achieve, should those be dependent at all on what that actual minimum wage starting point is? Or does that come intrinsically for something else in your mind?
I think there's a couple different ways to think about incentives, right? And that all comes down to company culture. Do you incentivize employees with compensation or added compensation structures? Or do you incentivize, through culture? So, without knowing too much about how internal, baseball works at Walmart, I'd be very curious to, what that would mean for them. That's just what screamed to me when I hear that. It's we don't want to do that because we're concerned about, employees wanting to move forward in the company. It sounds like that's a concern, and so it's probably less about culture, more about additional compensation or other monetary incentives that the company probably wants to consider in the future.
That's a good point. Yeah, I haven't actually. The culture part of it is not a part of the conversation that I've had yet to this point, so that's interesting to hear. Thanks for bringing that perspective up. Ashley, I hope I'm saying that right. Tell me if I'm not. Please correct me. But what's your thoughts here?
So as was interesting, as someone who worked in corporate finance and worked at Walmart at a point in time, I do think the increase in minimum wage will really improve productivity, just because a lot of the employees are really demoralized. And so I do think they're kind of ignoring some other aspects of increasing compensation that I think they will really benefit from. And so I really do think that they should kind of really consider that, instead of focusing on just how they would climb the ladder. But I think they would be really surprised. And also, I think we're ignoring how many percentage of Walmart employees receive government incentives, such as food stamps, as well as cash assistance. And so I'm pretty sure having that wage stability and not having to kind of focus on how they're going to feed their children with the next meal would allow them to really focus and be really good employees for Walmart.
Like, are any concerns here on brand? Like, how, I mean, do you think there's also some brand reputation risk by potentially taking this position?
Honestly, I think it's on brand for Walmart, to be quite frank. So it doesn't.
You think it's on brand? Okay.
I do. I think, like, in the world, Target has really been known to be forward thinking in regards to their workforce, especially when they remove the criminal background check. So to be frank, when I think of progressive in wage, I don't think of Walmart.
You don't. So it's kind of already in the brand a little bit. So they've got the ability to double down on this somewhat. I saw there was another hand raised. Jim.
To me, it's a false dichotomy. I don't understand why it has to be an either or. Either we pay you a fair living wage, or we give you a chance to advance. Like, shouldn't a great employer offer you both?
And doesn't the logic chain of the argument mean like there should be no minimum wage at all? So why don't we just start everyone at like 2 bits? Like, I don't really get it. It doesn't make sense. And anything you'd throw in here?
I think it's hard to even think about getting on the ladder when you don't have, if they're not paying a fair minimum wage. If everybody else is going to be paying $15 an hour, all of your competitors, I mean, you can't think about moving forward if you can't pay your bills now. So how do you address that issue right now? And Walmart being one of the largest employers in the entire country, I mean, you have to be thinking about how you're going to first give people the opportunity, have them want to make the choice to work for you versus your competitors, and then worry about, how do we kind of get them to continue? It's starting smaller, I think.
Yeah, and not everyone wants to ascend the ladder. That's the other point that I think is important to think about. That's not the thing that everybody wants to do. And so why should the people that don't want to ascend the ladder be hurt just to give those other people the opportunity to ascend the ladder by the definition of your logic? So